Okay, everyone, good evening and welcome to an event that I'm very excited for, and I hope you all are as well. Tonight, in this virtual room, we have with us four of the former Youth Poets Laureate of Philadelphia. And I think that's just incredible to have all of you in the same room. I want to go ahead and introduce our moderator for tonight's event. Sydney Brown, she, her, is the former Youth Poet Laureate. We're going to hear that a lot. She is an award-winning poet and author of Daydreaming. She is a senior at Abington Friends School and has been writing poetry since she was in the 5th grade. Brown has been featured in the New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, 6 ABC, Philadelphia Citizen, and Fox 29. She loves that there are no limitations to writing. She has recited her poetry at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Benjamin Franklin Hall, Lincoln University, the Ideas We Should Steal Festival, and the Kelly Writers House. Her poetry explores the topics of social justice, self-image, love, and nature. She won the first place in the National Hip Hop Workshop Poetry Competition and loves to perform spoken word poetry. She's the recipient of the Romero Scholarship for Excellence in Spoken Word. She is a Gold Award Ambassador Girl Scout who is active in improving her community and is the recipient of the Good Citizenship Award. Sydney wishes to inspire people to speak their truth and share her poetry with the world. Welcome, Sydney.
Hi. Okay,
All right.
so I will be introducing the rest of our guests tonight. So we'll start with Mia Concepcion. Mia Concepcion is an undergraduate student at Temple University studying art education. Mia began writing poetry in high school and competed in citywide poetry slams for Philly Slam League. Mia served as Philadelphia's 2019 to 2020 Youth Poet Laureate. And through this civic position, Mia thrived to engage youth poets across Philadelphia in the transformative power of poetry and the arts. Mia wishes to use poetry, arts, and multifaceted creative practices to speak on current issues, explore identity, and to inspire youth. Next, we have Husna Hashim. Husna is a poet, interdisciplinary artist, student herbalist, and undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania. A Philadelphia Youth Poet Laureate in 2017 to 2018, Husna is the author of the chapbook Honey Sequence, The Head and the Hand, published in 2018. And then finally, we have Wes Matthews. Wes is a Detroit-born, Philadelphia-based poet and essayist. His work has been published in 6805, Gulf Coast, Muzzle, and elsewhere. He is the recipient of the 2020 College Alumni Society Prize for his poetry and the 2020 Lillian and Benjamin Levi Award for his music criticism. Wes served as the 2018-2019 Philadelphia Youth Poet Laureate. Okay, so now we're going to get into the questions. These are questions that are going to help the audience members to know more about the Youth Poet Laureate program, and you want to make sure that you get your applications in by June 10th at noon. So the first question is, how did you decide to apply for the Youth Poet Laureate position? Who encouraged you or helped you to apply? I think we'll start off with Wes.
Sure, yeah, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. That was really good. And I feel very grateful to be in this virtual space again and be able to talk about something that was a big important part of my life. After a few years, it means a lot to me. So yeah, I applied to be the 2018-19 Youth Poet Laureate of Philadelphia. And I was fortunate enough that I had a really supportive base of people around me who really saw that poetry was something I cared about. And I was a shy kid, right? So I didn't really feel like branching out or sharing anything. I had a few poems that never saw the light of day. Nobody's ever heard of them. And I haven't revisited them since. But I was writing, and so with the few people that I would share my writing to, they were very supportive of me. I have a very lovely mother who was probably like the biggest motivator behind that decision to apply. I had a few great teachers and a few great friends who are also poets, and kind of like the confidence it circulated in our friend group, and I'm thankful for that. I think what ended up happening was just like, it was one of those crossroads where I was like, there's nothing to lose. It kind of came down to that because, like it is a tough decision. I had a whole year of confidence building before I made that decision, though, to apply, right? So it felt kind of natural, and it felt like, if this doesn't work out, it's okay. If it does work out, it's okay. It's great, So I think it came down to that particular mindset, and the decision was kind of I don't know. It wasn't anything that I was putting too much emotional weight on. It was just kind of like one of those things, So that's kind of like where I was coming from. Did I answer all of your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much.
Making sure.
Mia, would you like to go next? I'll repeat the question. How did you decide to apply for the Youth Poet Laureate position, and who encouraged you or helped you to apply?
Okay, so similar to Wes, I had a really powerful poetry base and community around me. Going to SLA for high school, our poetry club and class and team was very we were a cohort, and it was inspiring every day to be around amazing poets like Wes and Otter. And I remember just being so inspired. I wanted to be Youth Poet Laureate because of them. I wanted to follow in their footsteps. And basically, Mr. K, our teacher and poetry coach, encouraged all of us to apply. Like, he just wanted us to all go for it. And he wanted me to apply the same year as Wes. And I wasn't ready yet. I was, in my heart of hearts, I was like, I need to take a beat and write some more and get better at poetry. But by senior year, for 2019 to 2020, I was ready and I wanted to apply. So yeah, I was really encouraged by definitely our poetry community. We had great friends, great poetry, people around us, always encouraging us to write and to reach for this position. This was kind of my end goal. I knew I wanted this at some point in my high school career. And I was so incredibly gracious to actually achieve it.
Thanks so much for sharing. Husna, would you like to share?
Sure. So I actually applied for the position 3 times. And I always was writing and, involved in other kinds of art making and creative practices, and did slam for a year. And so a lot of kind of overlap with communities that all of us were a part of. And I think that it also was a goal that I had for high school, obviously, because I continued to apply. And what really helped me to refine my writing was attending workshops. I also was an avid submitter to the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards and did really well in that. And so I received a scholarship to go to the Kenyon Young Writers Workshop at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. And so some of the poems that ended up in my chapbook and that I used to submit in my application materials to this position, I actually wrote at Kenyon, or I wrote for Slam. And through that process of refinement over time, I don't think that I maybe was truly ready the first year that I applied, but I definitely improved my writing and benefited a lot from being in community with other young poets.
Thanks so much for sharing. I think what I really got from that is that it's important to have that group of people around you who are supporting you, but also if you don't have that group, I think just believing in yourself and making sure you're seeking out those opportunities to refine your work and really put your best foot forward. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next question. What was the hardest part about the application process? Okay, we'll sit with that for a second. And I think we'll start with Mia this time.
So the hardest part, I guess, for me was selecting kind of my example and sample poetry to submit. I think the rest of the application was, questions about, your personal experience with poetry and your goals for the position, but definitely having to kind of narrow down who I am as a poet and like what I write about and kind of show off my skill set. That was kind of tricky. I wasn't like intimidated by it, but I definitely felt a little bit like I have a lot of poems. Like, what do I choose? What is the best format to show? Because I did slam poetry. I wrote poetry. So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to submit, but I ended up kind of choosing a wide range of like what I write. But that was a little hard kind of narrowing that down.
Thanks for sharing. Husna, would you like to go next?
I think the hardest part for me was speaking to some of the more open-ended questions. So I remember a question about like the current poet laureate who you would be receiving mentorship from, kind of speaking to like their work, be it poetry ball. So like the civic service engagement component of these positions, and like how is that kind of resonant for you, as well as kind of work that you have done, and like putting that into sentence paragraph format was a little bit challenging, especially when trying to be authentic, but also sounding professional as a young person. So doing that application several times definitely taught me a lot.
Thank you. And Wes?
Yeah, I would say similarly to Husna, I felt like the hardest part of the application for me was like articulation of goals or stuff like that, So I feel like that was the first time in my life I actually had an application for something where I had to like give like a vision or a plan for something. I kind of had a vague idea of what I wanted to do for like the civic project aspect, which but I didn't know how to get across the message of why I was applying or what I wanted to do, or exactly what were my like goals, because I didn't really know myself. Those are hard questions. Those are really hard questions that ask you to investigate parts of yourself that you may not have discovered yet or come across yet. So I would say for those of you who have a similar problem, like really take some time with it. Don't like you don't have to feel so overly anxious or stressed about it, because they are just questions at the end of the day. And the way I answered back then may not reflect how I feel now about poetry or how I feel now about my experience. I may think something totally different. So it's not like a capsule in time. It's not going to represent you forever, and only a few people will read it, obviously. So, be honest though, and hopefully only good things will come from that.
Thank you for sharing. The next question is, what has been the most rewarding about your Youth Poet Laureate experience? Okay. Husna, would you like to start us off?
I don't think that I can name just one thing. Overall, it gave me a lot of kind of a very solid base for the continuation of a career that I began at a very young age. I was 10 when I started publishing my work. And so I really appreciated kind of the formalization of my career and the mentorship I received, and kind of being pushed to think about greater community and engaging like the whole city. And I had a lot of opportunities that I'm still kind of reaping the benefits of. One way that I think this has been beneficial is kind of helping me to like reflect on myself as an artist in the college application process, by being recruited for creative writing through the Kelly Writers House, where Wes and I work. So being able to come in and like have a portfolio of poetry that I had written and be able to kind of speak to experiences that I had was really helpful for me, just and onward in the articulation of myself as a poet and an artist.
Mia, would you like to answer the question as well?
Yes, again, I agree with Husna. Like there are so many amazing parts of this experience. To nail it down to one thing is really tricky. But basically, again, the networking that you get to do with such amazing poets across Philadelphia and like Philly-based, Philly-oriented poets, like you just get to meet so many amazing people and communicate with them and collaborate on projects and, poetry commissions. There are so many doors that are opened through this position. I definitely, there are people who I never met before, had heard of before, and all of a sudden I was like idolizing them and working with them, getting to work alongside also just amazing poets that I had looked up to. It was truly an amazing experience, and getting to attend, readings and workshops and work with people. All of that was such a rewarding part of the experience. But as far as like the skills I brought from it, socializing, communicating, talking professionally, like I had never emailed so much before in my life and had such correspondence with a lot of different people. And I'm really grateful for that, because I learned how to like communicate back and forth and schedule things and work around things. So it was a really wonderful experience getting to learn these skills, and skills that set me up for a lifetime now of work and future career goals.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, you really do have to send a lot of emails. You don't get enough practice about that in the prior to this. Wes, what was the most rewarding part for you?
Yeah, the sending emails thing is so true. I'm thinking about that now, but yeah, I guess, well, it's a communal position, so there's like you're always in a communal space. And I think it made me more open to people and community, right? And I was in communities I had never been in before. I was like Mia said, I was with people who were once like I was just in awe of, and I got to talk to them and speak to them and stuff like that. And it's like galvanizing. It feels rewarding. It feels like you're doing something. But also on the other end, it's like you are becoming an ambassador. You're becoming an ambassador for youth voices. You're becoming somebody that people look to, somebody who may inspire other people to write, who are shy and haven't written before, or kind of walking a tightrope of wanting to write, not knowing how, or wanting to write and not calling themselves a writer and stuff like that. So you become that, and that's rewarding. That's important to me. That's community building. That's building connections. Another thing I think is that it really deepens my admiration for poetry as a craft. And I think I know like through the laureate position, I kind of got a more focused, more centered voice of my own. Before that, I was just writing like people who I admired, and I didn't know it, So but looking back at those poems, I'm like, yeah, I've grown a lot since then. So it's rewarding in that aspect. But I there's so many things. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to like list every little thing, but I think also a desire to be committed to service is like very important. And that's kind of like a reflective of a more long-term passion and stuff like that. And just new perspectives about youth and life. I never viewed youth as kind of like a fragile thing. Like, I always thought that voices like young voices are important voices, and I think part of that comes from my experience and with poetry, even before and after the laureate position. So I'm very grateful and thankful for that. And yeah, that kind of touches on a lot of things, but that's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing. And on the flip side of that, what was the most challenging part of your Youth Poet Laureate experience? Mia, can we kick it off with you? Thanks.
I mean, I think the one I have to go with would be COVID, mainly because it happened during my year, during 2020. I think a lot of my events and like workshops, a lot of my plans definitely culminated in the springtime. Everything was happening in the spring. My project was right underway. I was collecting submissions, and I think COVID hit right at the time when like things were peaking, and I didn't really feel
I got some closure. Obviously, eventually I got to work on, other things, poetry, but it was cut short, and definitely that was a challenge for me because I was so excited to like do all of these events and perform at these like, readings and all of these amazing things that were going to happen. And it kind of, things, didn't work out as planned, but it was a pandemic. So, I think that was the most challenging part, just for me personally. The experience all throughout the year, though, before that was really amazing. And there weren't a lot of like setbacks and hardships, but definitely COVID came in the way. So hopefully that will not be a factor going forward, but it's always going to be there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That definitely affected me as well. Hasna, would you like to take it the next?
For me, it wasn't necessarily anything about the position itself, but everything else going on. In my life, I did dual enrollment at CCP my senior year, so all my classes were there, and I was applying to college. It's a really reflective to think about it because I'm graduating next week, full circle. But yeah, definitely like everything, applying to college, going to college. Some weeks I would have up to like 5 readings, like a reading every day. I'm not even exaggerating. While like doing homework and having like a lot of mental health challenges. So it was really stressful for me to manage all of that.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. Congratulations, I'm almost graduating. Yay. Wes, would you like to answer the question next?
Yeah, I would say from a personal standpoint, I think the hardest part was feeling accomplished. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, given the position itself as an accomplishment, but like I felt like I was trying to measure my success with these arbitrary markers. And so every time something kind of deviated from those markers that I saw, it felt like, it was just frustrating, And, but over time, I learned to be more accepting of things not going according to plan, because like improvisation is like a virtue in jazz music. Improvisation is the best thing ever, right? Because you get brand new creativity, your imagination really gets a kick. So I think learning from that was important, and not being so worried about the vision of like being accomplished and being successful and stuff like that. That came in handy really during my civic project, because it just didn't go as I planned originally, but in the end it was like it felt really beautiful, and I'm grateful for that. Another thing is that I'm, like I mentioned, I'm kind of not I wouldn't can classify myself as like a social butterfly, so to speak. I'm kind of, and so just like on a this is kind of like bare bones, but like, yeah, it was just kind of hard to get out and talk to people and make connections and feel like know what to say when people were like, oh, I love your poetry, I love your work and stuff like that, like after a reading or and stuff like that. Being in rooms for a reading full of people I never met before and didn't know and stuff, didn't know what to say, didn't know how to speak or how to act. And that's really hard. It's not easy. And I understand that. But in the end, I'm grateful for it, because now I have like a new layer of confidence in that, in those types of environments, I think. So that was definitely difficult for me personally.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And now the final question. What is one piece of advice that you would give young poets thinking about applying? Okay. Hasna, would you like to start us off?
Sure, and I do kind of want to add on to my response to the last question, which, as I continue to think about it, I think something really important in my experience that was a challenge was being like tokenized by a lot of different communities. And so in terms of like advice, that I would give is to kind of like not lose yourself, like not get a big head, but also not allow kind of the narrative. Like, I'm just reflecting on kind of things that I've seen written about myself and ways that that doesn't feel authentic to who I am, or even entering certain spaces and choosing to read or perform poems that I felt like would resonate with that particular audience, or would be calling out that particular audience in a certain way that ended up being very re-traumatizing or performative in a way that was actually unhealthy for me. So I would say just for new applicants in the future, Youth Poet Laureate of Philly, like, be really humble, think about kind of a sense of integrity, authenticity, like regularly check in with yourself and recognize that this is a journey. It's not you have this title and so now you're a refined person and you know what your identity is as a writer. Like, absolutely not. This is kind of a step on hopefully what will be a really long journey of your life, and poetry will continue to be integral to that, but it might not look how it did before.
Wes, would you like to give us some advice?
Absolutely, and I love that response. And I would just like echo the point that always like standing up for values is like really important, and like there is some air of tokenization that comes with people like youth poets, but they don't know you as a youth poet, right? So you are yourself. You're not just like some sort of like token for all poets or all youth poets, all young people who write. You represent your values and stuff like that. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. I would say in terms of advice, don't so the position, I think, by design is like really flexible. There's like a flexibility built into it. So I would say you make the position like what you want to see, right? So I would keep that in mind during your application process, because it's important to write about how you're being authentic or forward thinking in your goals and stuff like that. But there is not one correct model of being poet laureate, I think. So it's open for individual interpretation. So I would say like that is really I think that should be at the heart of the application and the heart of everything you do as laureate. Another thing is I always hear this, always like it people underestimating themselves, downplaying themselves in terms of a writer, like, oh, I'm not a writer, I just write, or I'm not, and it's like don't underestimate your ability, because I don't know, there's so much the thing about poetry is that there's so much to offer and none of it looks the same, right? So I think like these measures, these markers, they don't, just kind of abandon them. You know what I mean? Be the measure of being a poet, the measure of being a writer. You are you, so write like you, and don't underestimate the things that you're bringing to the table. And then the last thing I'll say is that it's a position for it feels like an honor, but it also is a position. It's really a position for others. It's as much a civic position as it is an artistic position. So make sure that you're operating from a basis of compassion, love, fellow feeling, real genuine care for the community, and not just performative, not just for show. Make it like, if you really, really care, that should guide everything you do in your application process, and for the person who selected, everything that you do after that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. And Mia, what is one piece of advice that you would give a young poet applying?
I echo everything that Wes and Husna have said. Definitely, to expand on a lot of the things, I agree with the kind of adaptability that you have to have going into this application and position. Be open to kind of everything changing, and nothing set in stone. There's going to be things that come up all the time that are new for you, that you've never done before. it's very strange and nerve-wracking, but it's also exciting. So kind of be prepared for a lot of new positions and new situations that you might find yourself in. You know, if you've never hosted a workshop before, that can be a pretty daunting thing, and performing before people and all of these wonderful things. So be adaptable, be ready to kind of change and go with the flow. But I agree with you also, you're a person at the end of the day. You are yourself a youth poet representing other youth poets in the city, but stay true to yourself, speak your truth, write your truth, and definitely go along with this mentorship and take advantage and utilize that power that you have of the poet laureate that's with you. I think it's a really valuable tool to have someone who's experienced in writing poetry and has a career in poetry, and really look towards that mentorship, take advantage of it, use it, work with the people in your community. I think that's a really key aspect of the position. Again, it's a civic position. It's a representative of the city of Philadelphia and the youth poets in Philly. So I think working to support and uplift the voices of those around you is also central. Speak your truth, write your truth, but definitely work to engage actively with the people in the poetry community here. That's kind of how I view it.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your great advice. It looks like we have one more question. So what is a current project that you're working on and that you're excited about? I'll let you guys think about that for a second. Okay. Hasna, do you want to start us off?
I've been thinking of my work a lot more expansively, and like identifying as an interdisciplinary artist, and my poetry and writing has changed a lot. And so I'm really excited about experimentation and working with collage and fiber kind of things. So that's what I've been doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Wes, what about you?
Yeah. I guess one thing that I'm working on currently that's really fun and brings me a lot of joy is I'm doing kind of like a hybrid music / writing / poetry kind of a program workshop series thing at West Philly High School with some wonderful students, high school students, and we write the kids are like really into making hip hop music, which is the type of music that I just like love making and stuff like that. So we have workshops all the time. We just got in the studio last week, which was really fun, and they spit some rhymes, and that's the type of stuff that I feel like kind of comes from the Laureate, like my love for those types of things. So I think I'm excited about that. I don't know where it's going, so like excited might be the wrong word, but I think it's really fun and just like a chill thing to do,
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And Mia, what about you?
I don't have any current projects ongoing, but I definitely also am really excited to explore kind of the multifaceted interdisciplinary approach of my art making practices, especially because I'm an art student right now. So I'm learning so many different techniques, and I'm really hoping to incorporate them all together. I would love to figure out a way to incorporate my poetry into all of the new things I'm learning, like fabrics, fibers. I would love to really combine and mesh together music, art, all of it together. I definitely am a visual artist as well as a writer, and I like music as well. So I'm hoping to bridge all of these things together in the future and definitely work on some sort of project with that. As far as poetry, I'm really hoping if all is well and COVID is, away, I would like to join Temple's Babel Poetry Collective. That is a big goal of mine. So I'm really hoping to do that in the future.
That's awesome. And I will answer this question too. A project that I'm currently working on creating a spoken word album. And I mean, so far it's been really fun just playing around with different beats. I'm learning how to use different like GarageBand and things like that. And yeah, so that's what's a project I'm working on. Let's see. To finish us off, do you guys have any things that you want to share about your experience as Youth Poet Laureate, or any other things that you wanted to touch on more from the questions I asked?
Yeah, I kind of have a question if people want to answer. So what's like, do y'all have a favorite moment or event, or like, isolated kind of experience that you fondly remember from your time as laureate that you would like to share?
I really enjoyed any kinds of readings and events that brought together poets from all over the city, like for a cause or an event. I'm thinking of the poets for Puerto Rico reading in like, I don't even know, 2017, 2018, that Yolanda Wisher and Denise from and co-organized. And that was a really beautiful event that obviously had a goal of fundraising, but also was just a great opportunity to be in community. And I think there's a really special magic that comes from those spaces, like kind of the energetic sense of the space, but also the quiet, where people are kind of very poised or having an exclamation, be it a snap or like a kind of sound. I really miss that.
Yeah, I think for me, my favorite event was performing at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I had been doing a lot of virtual events, so then to be in person and to perform in front of a lot of different people was just really fun. And I really loved writing that poem for that event.
I think one of like the great experiences I had was getting to write a poem and perform it virtually for the Rosenbach, but getting to go there and look at their collection. I think they were like writers that year, and I got to hold in my hands like 100-year-old texts, and they were just really fragile. One of them was a Phyllis Wheatley book of poems that she wrote and published, and it was published in the 1700s. And just getting to see that before my eyes and write a poem about that, that was a truly awe-inspiring moment. That's definitely a highlight for me. But also a wonderful project we did was the Ode to Dissent and Unity, where we collected a bunch of verses that we all wrote into a collective poem. That was in the summer of 2020. That was also like, well, I didn't get to finish my original poetry project for Youth Poet Laureate. It kind of changed into that one. And I thought that was a really beautiful experience to see how all of our verses kind of came together for one poem. And I really loved that experience.
I think for me, like a very memorable thing was there was this workshop that I did with younger kids, so like maybe like 7, 8, 9, that age, and that they were like, so at that age you don't expect to just like write poetry at like any given time, but you're open to it, and it was so cool. I think young writers like that age just had the imagination is just kind of no limits, no inhibitions. And we talked about superheroes, we talked about like ideas of home, and the poems were so good, and we did their drawings, we were so good, it was so fun. And I think I got every one of their names, and I might remember all of their names, and I have a picture, and it was so lovely, it felt so rewarding. That was kind of like my first experience being kind of like a teacher, so to speak, so it was just so cool. And yeah, I think about it often because it brings me fond feelings of joy and stuff. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that question, Wes. Definitely just you talking about that just made me think about like just going into schools and talking to kids and getting like little letters from them sometimes. It's just the sweetest thing. Like they really, like they look up to you and they just want to learn more about poetry, and just to inspire them to do that is really, really rewarding. Uh, are there any other questions that anyone has, or something else they wanted to touch on that we talked about earlier?
Maybe I'll touch on just Well, there are a few things. Okay, maybe I'll just touch on real quick, like the connections aspect. What does that mean? Um, it's like over the tenure of being a poet, youth poet laureate, like you really meet people, like really meet people. Like it's crazy how many people you meet. I probably met more people within that span of like the past 3 years combined. So it's just crazy. So I would say like there are still people who reach out to me today and ask for certain things, ask for participation in certain projects, or participation in certain events, workshops, stuff like that. And that's important. But also it's like you get people who are really in your corner. I think like I think some of my recommenders for like college were like people I met from being youth poet laureate. So and publishers and stuff like that. You get it's really community building, and it feels good. And yeah, so that's what I would say, just to kind of like clarify what I mean by connections. It's not like business connections, but it's just like people who, it's like, it's like writing. It's like people who care for you, and also like some more professional things, but it's a wide scope. It's a wide scope for sure.
Thanks for sharing. Mia, Husna, anything else you want to add? Okay, well, thank you so much to the Free Library of Philadelphia for helping us host this event. Thank you to Mia, Wes, and Husna for sharing so many great ideas about how you should apply for this application and their experiences as Youth Poet Laureates. And I wanted to remind you to please get your applications in by June 10th at noon. And please just put your whole heart into it, and don't be afraid to apply. If you're a poet, if you don't think you're a poet, but you write poetry a lot, please apply. Yeah. Thank you for joining